Aircraft carriers are so vital to the U.S. government that federal law requires the U.S. Navy to have a certain number of operable pages. The answer is 11. But how did they arrive at this figure? And why is there such a focus on aircraft carriers rather than other ships? Welcome back to another exciting video. Today's video, the real reason why the U.S. Navy has 11 aircraft carriers. Before we start the video, please like, subscribe, and press the bell icon. The number of aircraft carriers, the size of the United States Navy, and the overall size of the United States military all follow a simple formula based on two big wars, but it's not what you think. Being the most powerful does not imply being assertive enough. The United States possesses the world's largest and most powerful fleet, yet more than simply being number one is required. The most formidable military may be unable to beat the combined armies of numerous nations, much as any MMA champion would be overwhelmed if they faced multiple opponents. So, how much electricity is sufficient? The military doctrine of the United States is centered on power projection. Power projection is a country's ability to deploy and sustain armies outside of its borders. The United States maintains over 750 foreign military bases in 80 countries worldwide to facilitate this. However, the Navy is the United States' primary source of power projection, exceptionally where permanent basing is constrained. This is precisely why aircraft carriers are being prioritized. What is the first question that U.S. presidents ask during a crisis? The presidents are more interested in the air wing allocated to the aircraft carrier. The carrier is nothing more than a floating air base. The principal function of any aircraft carrier is to allow the air wing it carries to operate. Like how bread is merely a vessel for transporting butter, and the genuine power projection that aircraft carriers are known for is made possible by the planes in the carrier air wing, which can project tactical air power over vast distances, such as airborne early warning, air interdiction, and air-to-surface warfare. In reality, the same rule that requires the U.S. Navy to have at least 11 aircraft carriers also requires 9 carrier air wings. But how did the United States government arrive at the number 11? The United States Navy's 11 supercarriers outnumber all other nations' aircraft carriers. And that's simply in terms of quantity. Even though more carriers may be rushed into deployment if necessary, the overall number of deployable supercarriers is far below the standard 11. In practice, 2 to 3 supercarriers are deployed at any given time, which is sufficient. Enough to fight and win 2 wars simultaneously in 2 different parts of the world. Under President Lyndon B. Johnson, the United States Armed Forces were designed to fight 2 wars simultaneously. A half-war was introduced at some point to be waged in the Third Globe. When Nixon gained office in 1969, the formula was altered to accommodate fighting 2 wars simultaneously. Following that, each president's approach has been slightly tweaked, but the underlying measure is defined as the ability to battle roughly simultaneously in 2 geographically different locations on the planet. This is known as the 2 primary regional contingency strategies. The ability to discourage and defeat large-scale cross-border aggression in 2 distant theaters in overlapping periods is critical for the United States to maintain its global power status and interests. The 2 overlapping military conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan are the most recent examples of this concept in action. The Iraq War began in 2003 with the toppling of Saddam Hussein, and the formal withdrawal of U.S. troops was completed in 2011. Yet, the mismanagement of the power vacuum following Saddam's death gave prominence to ISIS in 2014, followed by the re-involvement of U.S. soldiers, troops from the U.S. In the meantime, the war in Afghanistan began in 2001 and lasted for 20 years. In February 2020, the United States and the Taliban signed an agreement in Qatar in which the Taliban agreed to take unspecified action to prevent other groups, including Al-Qaeda, from using Afghan soil to threaten the United States and its allies in exchange for the complete withdrawal of all international forces from Afghanistan. By the end of August 2021, while the entire world was watching, the US and NATO forces had hurriedly left Kabul, re-establishing Taliban authority in the country. However, the concept of fighting 2 wars at the exact time dates back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The United States saw territorial expansion in the late 19th century. In 1898 alone, the United States annexed Hawaii, acquired Guam and Puerto Rico, and paid $20 million to Spain to purchase the Philippines. With part of those islands in the Pacific and the others in the Atlantic, a Navy presence in both oceans was essential. With the opening of the Panama Canal in 1914, ships could traverse from one side to the other, allowing the U.S. Navy to be present in both oceans without requiring twice as many ships. However, by the 1930s, with the rise of new regional powers to the west and the decline of the Royal Navy to protect the United States from threats from the east, defense planners were forced to consider the possibility of confronting two threats at the same time, one from Germany on the east and one from Japan on the west. As a result, the 1940 Vincent Walsh Act, often known as the Two-Ocean Navy Act, was enacted. This allowed for a 70% increase in the size of the U.S. Navy fleet. This was the most significant naval acquisition bill in United States history, authorizing $8.5 billion for a Navy expansion program focused on aircraft and aircraft carriers. As a result, 18 aircraft carriers were built, as well as aviation and naval facilities were expanded. It's one thing to devise a notion or strategy, such as fighting and winning two big wars simultaneously. But coming up with the statistics is an entirely different matter. How many Army divisions, Air Force fighter wings, and Navy carrier strike groups are needed to support such a strategy? Various ships are required to support the carriers when they are deployed, which is why Navy ships such as cruisers, destroyers, and sometimes submarines and supply ships form a formation known as a carrier strike group. Still, conservative public policy organizations, most notably studies conducted by the Heritage Foundation, call for a much larger military. For example, a 400-ship Navy rather than a 355-ship Navy, and 13 aircraft carriers rather than 12 plus 1. The one accounts for a page that virtually always needs major midlife maintenance. The reasoning behind desiring the other 12 aircraft carriers is to keep one runner in each of the world's three key zones, the Atlantic, Pacific, and the Mediterranean/Middle East, and to have 3 extra aircraft carriers deployed for each airline. This keeps the ships, crew, and aircraft healthy and effective. More extended deployment periods may result from fewer ships, which may not be operationally feasible. The USS Nimitz's 340-day deployment, which finished in March 2021, was the longest of any aircraft carrier since the Vietnam War. While supporters of the two major theater warplanes claim that no one has come up with a better or more robust answer for scaling the United States military, significant costs are connected with sustaining and building a larger military force. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content.